thank you so much for sticking around for the Q&A. I'm going to start us off with some questions, but I'd love to pass it over to you and also hear some of your responses to this beautiful story. I find as a creator, what's always the most interesting to me is that like initial spark of where an idea comes from. And so Julie, I would love to hear like what really interested you or started you on this journey of exploring Les Filles du Roi.
I first learned about Les Filles du Roi, or a version of the story of Les Filles du Roi, when I was in elementary school growing up. So I think I was about 12 or 13 years old. And I learned that some of the women who came over were that age, or even just a little bit older. And from that very first moment, I went, okay, whoa, stop. There's something going on here that I didn't quite understand or that intrigued me. And it was in our history books, but it felt very narrow. I had more questions than I had answers. So that always stayed with me, imagining what those experiences were and why people would choose to come over and what they experienced when they got here. And then years later, I had the opportunity, I was commissioned by a company here in Vancouver called Fugue Theatre to create a libretto for a musical theater piece. And they asked me, were there any composers that I was interested in working with? And I had met Corey and Corey's partner Marshall, I think a few years before that. And I knew that I was really interested in feminizing the narrative and digging into what these women's experiences were of the time, but also acknowledged that there was an indigenizing of the narrative that needed to happen, or that could happen, and that would crack things open even more, and that needed to be told. We wanted to really dig into and reimagine that history. And when I thought about that, there was no one else that I'd rather work with than Corey, and Corey came on board in a huge way. So as he described his involvement, so it really grew beyond my wildest dreams. And maybe I'll pass it over to you now, Corey.
Oh, about the creation or about how we went about it?
Yeah.
Well, I think it was, it's like 10 years ago now. So it is like, this has been such a long journey of creation, but originally it was about getting it to the stage and sharing this story that, you know, we both were so drawn to and wanted to see on stage. But then when the pandemic happened, that really stopped our possibility of being able to tour it. How many people here saw the production when it was in here? Oh, okay. Oh, wow. Well, yeah, at the York cool. In 2018. So we were planning on touring it across the country, and then when COVID hit, we switched all of that. And turns out doing a musical out on the land, like outside, was kind of the perfect thing to be doing. And it kept everyone working and also allowed us to really flex our creative muscles in new ways. And so that's how all this came to be.
I find that so interesting that a lot of the history that we do have comes from that very like male colonial side of things. And so I'm curious how it was working with that kind of source material and sort of the imagining that you had to bring to it yourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so one of the source materials that I came across was the one time that I found a perspective, the voice of a woman actually being brought forward. So it wasn't a man telling her story or a man recounting facts of this many women arrived on this many boats. And what it was is that it was a letter that this woman had written back to her son in France. And even that sort of raised questions for me, because that wasn't part of the general narrative, right? That someone might already have a family, already have children back in France before they came. And the other thing that was mentioned in her letter was that every morning in the winter, she would get up and the first thing she did was sweep the snow out of the house that had come in overnight, sort of like the inches and inches of snow that had accumulated. So both of those things, again, just got the wheels turning. But really that was the one time of all the research that we did that something in a woman's perspective and a woman's voice came across. And so that just made us hungry, I think, to imagine more and imagine beyond that. Yeah. And to dig into the oral narratives too, and that's a whole other piece of it. That sort of with the work that we did. So we did 2 or 3 research trips, I think, where Corey and I went out to Quebec and Upper New York State, so to Haudenosaunee and Kanien'kehá:ka territory, and met with knowledge keepers and language speakers, and really were able to witness and to share in the oral tradition and all those narratives of what was happening on the land at that time, and then to start to combine that and then put our imaginations to work as well.
Yeah, and we also shared the story that we wanted to tell with the community, and sort of got a little bit of a collaboration going around. Is this something that's in line with some of those histories that you've been told or that your grandparents have been telling you? And what was so amazing about that experience was that what we were hearing was just a lot of encouragement, and people just saying like that they never thought that they would hear Ganiangeha language in this kind of piece. So it really gave us that feeling of like, okay, like the support to feel that we were on the right track.
Yeah, and I might just add that we learned that there was this big language reclamation movement happening in the community, to the extent that when a language speaker passed away, they would appoint a young person to take up the language. So they ensured they were maintaining, if not growing, the number of language speakers. So to be able to play a part in that language reclamation process and to have this piece feed into that was really meaningful, and is something we discovered along the way. These weren't facts that were known to us before we started the journey of creation. So these happy accidents or these coincidences or these connections that we were able to make in the process were really rewarding and special.
And then finding out, because the group of women who helped us to translate it and who coached the actors and the elders who worked with us, it was a whole group of really wonderful Ganiangehaga women, and finding out that then they were using the script in their classrooms and like having their students read, and practice the Ganiangeha. So it was constant little surprises and little gifts that recognized that this was something that the community really recognized as being needed to kind of enter into the language in a new way. And we just had no idea that was going to resonate in that way.
Yatina, Anska,
Tuknigun,
Tuknigun, Yoyanale.
That is so special. I'm curious, we've talked about how there was a staged version and now we have this beautiful film. And so I'm curious what the adaptation process was like for you both, and what new opportunities were available to you now that it could be filmed and you didn't have to have the container of being in a theater.
Yeah, well, I'll start us off with that one. I think what was so special was to presence the land. So even from the early times where Corey and I started working on it, we thought about the cycle of the 4 seasons and how that would be sort of part of the rhythm of the piece. And so nature was always a part of those early conversations. And then to be able to show that, to be out on the land filming and to presence. And I think there's these beautiful shots too. So kudos to our editor and like the cinematography team and that are, everyone who worked on the film, because I think they've really presented the natural world in such a beautiful way. So there's these beautiful moments of contemplation where we're just looking at the water or the sky or the trees. And I think that's added a beautiful element to the film. And as actors, it was really lovely to be there, to feel your feet on the ground and to feel the wind in your hair and the smells of the water. It was really, it sort of brings your performance and brings the storytelling alive in a really special way.
I would say that one thing that we talked about a lot when we were adapting was that we didn't just want to put a camera in a theater and capture it that way. We really wanted to really look at the adaptation process as being finding the ways that in film it really gives you that sense of feeling that intimacy, those in the way that we were trying to share these like really intimate personal moments of these women. Well, the camera can get so much closer to that. You can really, you really get to experience that in such a more intimate way. And then I think that just like what Julie was just saying about getting a chance to look at the horizon, was that so much of the world back then was slower and was like you're traveling along a river for days and you don't have anything else to look at but the sky and the water and the trees that you're passing. And so you pick up on these things a lot more. And so that was really exciting to be able to bring in a little bit of that worldview that was shared to us from Yawendas, the elder that supported us in the process, just around the pace of traveling by foot or by canoe and how that could be incorporated into the way that we were telling this story. And so that was a really exciting aspect of this film that we didn't really get to explore as much when it was on stage.
I definitely feel a sense of the land, especially, the opening shots. We get the like trees and that soaring feeling. And yeah, it's really, really exciting to see.
Just following on that question that you had, so in some of the scenes there, you actually had more staged or a stage play presentation, which I found quite powerful. Can you speak to that and why you chose to intersperse that throughout?
Well, thank you for the question. That was always something that we wanted to make sure to have a bit of a tip of the hat to the theater, but to use it in a way that was really deliberate and that helped us to go deeper into the character's emotion. So you'll see a lot of the times when we go into those theatrical spaces, it's moments of memory, it's moments of dream, it's moments of prayer. All these really personal moments where we get little glimpses of what that character might, because that's the way that it happens when, all sorts of different thoughts that pop into our head. It's like we see them in sort of, it's kind of in the gray area, where we're not really sure, like, did I think that? Is that something that really happened? Or is it just that my brain's making that up? And that truth, just of being human, existed back then too. And so we were, a big part of what we were wanting to explore was how can the theater and that black box space help to serve as a tool to share that inner life of the characters through the film.
Yeah, for me in those moments, there's a lot of psychological complexity going on in those moments, and so it does, allow for this different way of thinking about what they're or questioning of what they're experiencing. Like reality becomes a bit fuzzy, and I think that's true to our experience as humans. Like Corey was saying, that sometimes it's not black and white, and you're somewhere in between, and you don't even quite know what's real or what's not. Yeah.
And we went back and forth on this so many times. And I feel like even up until the moment that it reached an audience, we were kind of second guessing ourselves of like, we'll see if people like this. And what's been so amazing is how much people have responded to those moments. And I also thought maybe that would be confusing, or maybe people would just be taken out and kind of be like, this doesn't make any sense to me, and kind of just think it's like artsy fartsy. But actually, people have really said like, I almost wish there was more of that, or I wish that like that had been, in the same way that the land was given so much presence. Maybe that inner life had could have been more. That they longed for that, and so that's been such a beautiful gift of sharing the film. Is just also realizing that audiences are really willing to take those leaps with you.
I think one of the things that I loved right at the beginning was these women are arriving and then they meet this young First Nations woman, or child at the time, really, and are told that she's going to be the leader. And you see how, Les Filles du Roi are brought over as baggage, right? Women have a right to say something. Why Canada thought that they could take status away from the children of the matriarchs when it was the settler husband that was not part of the deal, right?
That was such a huge part of why we wanted to share this story, was being able to shed light on there could have been another way, right? That there was a different choice or decision or presence, platform that could have been given to women in our society if, the settlers had maybe been more embracing of that different way and worldview. So that was really great. And I also think it's kind of a call to that we can still make those decisions today. We can still make those changes today. And that was a big part of recognizing why it's important to share this story again.
Absolutely. I love that you picked up on that. And my mother's one of 9 girls, so I come from a very strong matriarchy on my French-Canadian side of the family. So for me, there's a little bit of an honoring of that. And also, as we were doing this work in Akwesasne is the name of the community out east where we worked, and when they were sharing with us the teachings and learning about that matriarchy, like that was so exciting to then contemplate, to put myself in that point of view of that white settler woman coming over in the 1600s and just having her mind blown by the idea of there being an alternative, there being more possibilities beyond what she knew to be real and true. And that was just really exciting to play with as a dramatic possibility. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that collision of the role of women in these cultures coming together. And my favorite scene is when Guattari and Mary-Jean like meet each other and are learning to communicate with each other for the first time.
Mm-hmm. And they're conducting business. You know what I mean? Like it's a business transaction, you know? Yeah.
Hi. I went to high school in Quebec as an immigrant. It was so sad that there was nothing in the history books, at least in the French history books. I'm wondering, and based on what you said, I guess Ontario was the same. Have you thought about giving the film to schools, all institutionals, educational institutions?
We're working on getting it out there as far and wide as possible, but I think that the criticism that's come is like, well, they're expecting the French story of the women coming over, and then they get like an indigenous perspective. So I think that challenging of the status quo, the challenging of that history that's been said and understood and taught it's just really hard to like break down that door, as I'm sure you have experienced. But I feel like hopefully the more that this can get out, the more that maybe some people who are in that kind of like English-French dominance can see the perspective of Indigenous people and think, well, what if that had been your language? What if that had been your culture? What if that had been your, territory that you had been living on, since time immemorial, and then, visitors had come in and that had happened in the same way. So I think that even just having that question be asked, I think is part of that step forward.
And I'll just add on to that from the very beginning, it was important to us that the film have the 3 languages. That was a really, we were in agreement from the very beginning, because we know that we live in a country where so many people come from these diverse and multilingual backgrounds and speak more than one language on a daily basis. And that felt true to us, and that felt real. And it felt like the collision of the 3 cultures was so important to the tensions of the time and the tensions in the story that it would have felt wrong to be without one of them. But I feel like some people just want it to be one or the other. So want the film to be entirely in French or entirely in English, or, so I think that's what we're encountering as well. But I'm so happy we made the decisions that we did, and we're sticking by it, that this is the film we wanted to make. Yeah.
Just to add, we work at an Indigenous school, Tsleil-Waututh Nation. Would love to have the film.
Yay! Let's
Thank
talk
you.
After.
Yes, let's get in touch.
I'm not sure if I have a question. I just wanted to say thank you for telling this story. I grew up here. I went to school here. I've never heard of this, but I want to have an open heart and to listen to every story that is being told. And I also noticed that there were 3 languages in it and thought, wow, that's amazing. And that is great. And more people need to hear this story. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing that.
You.
Yeah.
Hi, first off, thank you for that beautiful film. I came because I am Métis, my family's from Red River, and in my genealogy I had seen this flag for Les Filles du Roi. I wanted to ask about the choice of ending. At first I found it really startling. I was like, okay, like we're just forgiving, we're just moving on. But then it struck me, but like that is the Indigenous approach. I still work in the Métis and Indigenous community, and I was wondering if you could talk a little more about that theme, and if that was like engaging with, you know, the Catholic sort of tension. I don't know, I felt like there was like more to be explored there, but maybe not. So I'd love to hear you speak a little more to that.
Well, I think a big part of us sharing this story, also because it's a musical, we have a little bit of freedom, that it's like we're not doing like a historical drama like of this. It's like we can imagine that these characters weren't really singing, and it wasn't just, you know, like a fun musical theater song. But that gave us a lot of license as creators to think, well, how do we, what do we want to see, and how do we insert ourselves? And for so long, it's hilarious because Julie and I really, when we were writing, it was like we were writing this for our younger selves. We were writing this for the next generation. We were writing this for the stories that we wished we had seen. And so we were like so a part of it. We are a part of it. We're all a part of it. You know, if you're connected to this land, if you've grown up here, this is your history, right? This is for all of us. And so that was never lost on us. It never felt like, oh, well, we're telling this other story. It felt like this is for all of us. And part of that, of positioning ourselves in that way, was, well, then what do we see for the future, and how is it that we can leave Gatterly, and what is it that the journey that she goes on to be able to be in that role of leadership? And that's hope. That's a hope for the future, that these, you know, the wrongs that have happened won't always be, and won't always be the way. We can reclaim, we can rebuild. And we can always make those choices. And so I feel like for Gatterly, that was a foundational part of her journey as clan mother, right? And for us as well.
Yeah, and I sometimes think of it that we start the film in 1665 and we finish it in 2065, in a way, in terms of what we're saying or what we're hoping for, what we're trying to put across. And because we know that people come to the film with their knowledge or their experience of being a Canadian or living in Canada, or what they've learned or what they've not learned. And so we know that's equally part of the film, that people are filling in their ideas and their experiences and joining what we're sharing. And so everyone is going to interact with it in a slightly different way. And it might percolate 2 days from now, something else might bubble up for you. But yeah, we're trying to do a lot. We're trying to do a lot.
I'm curious, since creation can be such like a intimate and personal thing, how was it to work together? And like, what do you think is the like secret ingredient for like having a good collaborative relationship?
Well, having a collaborator that you trust and that is easy to work with. And I think Julie and I learned, we've been working together for so long that it's like we've just learned how to do it.
And I think we're very complementary too, and there's areas that muscles that I have that are weaker, and then muscles that I have that are stronger. And we have like, between the two of us, we cover a lot of territory and cover a lot of different perspectives and skills and ideas. So I think we're very fortunate that way. And I think it helps, you know, when you have a collaborator who's good-hearted, like that just goes such a long way, and that's never in doubt.
I have a more practical question. Being a musician, I'm interested in the unbelievably gorgeous, lush music. So at what point, and you were speaking about how the project started, where it came from, moved along, and then Corey was involved, and then the development of the story and whatnot. At what point did the music become part of the process, and did it start with one song, or did you start with a whole concept and then picked out songs? Or I'm just interested in that whole process.
Well, from the moment that Julie approached me, it was always going to be, actually, it wasn't always going to be a musical. It started off as potentially like an opera or an operetta. Yeah. Was kind of where it first started. And then I was like, I can't do that. I don't know what I'm talking about. I can't do an operetta. I was like, can we make it a musical? But I think really the first thing that came to me were these huge sort of grand chords at the beginning, these like giant, what I call the O Canada chords at the beginning of the piece, that are these like, sort of triumphant, that give the audience and the listener a sense of what to expect, but also then the rolling pattern and then the shifting of all the different strings that happen kind of, for me, paint a more complex picture of what was the reality on the land at the time. And so that was really the first thing I think that I wrote, was this like like this like sort of rolling pattern, and it just comes back over and over, and it works under everything. You know, it's very malleable for different seasons, you know.
Have a great evening, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for being here tonight.